Good day, fellow deal makers. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to have a conversation about sales and investing in residential real estate and what's going on in the northern part of the country. Mr. Christopher, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and it's a pleasure to be on here.
Yeah, man. Good to have you. So, tell us a little bit about who you are and what do you focus on?
Yeah, so I run a independent residential brokerage in Princeton, New Jersey, and we do residential real estate sales, investing, and basically recruiting agents and training agents.
Awesome, 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 awesome. So, as you're building and growing your independent agency, um, how did you get your start in real estate? Give us an idea of how you got going, and then maybe some milestones that you've achieved in your deal making journey.
Sure. Yeah. So originally, I started on the investment side of real estate. So before I got my license, um, I was involved with wholesaling and flipping homes. And what got me involved with that was I had a previous business that I was done with. And one of my buddies from college was involved in the residential real estate investing side. So I said, you know what, this sounds like a pretty good thing. It sounds like I can make some money on it. Let me kind of learn about how it works. So um, I have most of my background had been in sales up to that point. So I get involved with residential real estate investing and did some flips and some wholesale deals. And I said, really the best part about this is actually the sales side. So I said, maybe I should just get my real estate license. And my thought process was if I get my license and I start helping people buy and sell, I can also learn the market better because I'll learn through their experiences without having my own skin in the game, so to speak, on the investment side. So that's what I did. I got my license, and then I ended up signing on with Keller Williams. And the only reason I went with them is because there's a guy in the licensing class that he was running the class, and the guy seemed like he was real good. Like he had, I could tell, like when you've been in sales for a period of time, you can kind of tell if somebody else knows how to sell, and just based on their mannerisms, how they speak, and kind of the feeling that you get. And I said, this guy that's teaching the class knows what he's talking about. He's a salesperson. I said, if I sign up here, I'll probably learn a boatload from this guy. And so that's what I did. I ended up signing up. I started under him. He kind of showed me the ropes, and I took off. I was a top producer my first year, and then after that, I just kept going and going, and built up a small team, and then I ended up transferring that team over to an independent brokerage, which I'm running now.
Nice. All right. So, year one, top broker, or not top broker, top producer. How in the world did you do that in an office of how many?
So the way I'll put it is I was the top newcomer. I wasn't like
Okay.
producing like guys that were there for like 10 years, but I was the best newcomer. And probably the only person that, so they had this thing at Keller Williams, the cap in your first year. Like if you pay them 24,000 in commissions, then you get to take home 100%. So um, I basically capped out my first year, and I did it in like with, I think it was like 4 or 5 months to go, and got to take home 100% of the commission after that. But basically what I did was I committed to lead generating every single day. So I would go out. If I didn't door knock, I would be on the phone, and I would go after expired leads. And basically, I would just up to the door, have a packet. If they didn't answer, leave the packet. And then anybody that I couldn't get in touch with on the first time, I would just keep calling them until I can get them on the phone. They tell me no, or yeah, I'm interested, or yeah, maybe later on, or don't call me again. So, there's different routes you take, and you go from there. But
Yeah.
I would say persistence and consistency are keys to succeeding in the prospecting game.
Yeah. So for prospectors, right? For people who looking getting into the real estate game, you got your wholesaling and your flipping. That's where you got into the business of real estate, right?
Yeah.
Let's start there because I think that also helped you when you talk about door knocking. I think that terrifies some people. But let's go back to wholesaling and flipping. How did you get your start in that? How did you find deals and opportunities? And how did you become successful there?
Sure. So with the wholesaling and flipping, um, that actually I started finding deals through probate leads. You go to the county or you go to the municipal courthouse or whatever, and they have for each county they have people that are going into probate. So somebody that what that means is anybody who inherits a property, their father passes away, they become they name them the executor. They are then responsible for taking care of that property or selling it or whatever the case may be. And in many cases, a lot of these people that get these properties, the properties tend to be in disrepair, especially if somebody has been living in it for years and they haven't been, maintaining them.
Hmm.
And so I would send a letter out to I think I had like 4 or 5 counties that I was sending letters out, and then people would respond. I would talk to them. And at the time, the guy that got me involved with it, he would go on with me on some of these appointments and kind of that's how I learned to kind of look what to look for, how to evaluate the home properly, how much are the repairs going to cost, things like that. Because you have to know by looking at a house, you have to be able to ballpark certain things to know if it's going to be a good deal. And then, once you figure out, hey, this could be a good deal, then you can bring in a contractor and do a formal quote and all that before you put together an offer. But that's kind of how I got started in the investment side. Now, talk about door knocking. Door knocking, I got started with that a long time ago, back in like 2008. Out of college, I started with Edward Jones, and they put me through a training program. At the time, they started you out as a financial advisor through door knocking in communities,
Hmm.
and you weren't selling investments at the door, but you were just introducing yourself. You say, "Hey, good afternoon. I just wanted to stop by and introduce myself. I'm a local at the time. I was saying local financial advisor. Here's some information about my company." And then you just make some small talk. Hey, how long have you been living in the area? What do you like about the area? Hey, how has your 401k plan been doing? And so I would use that to get the phone number, have a little bit of a conversation, make some notes, and then they would go into a database for future follow up, a phone call, and mostly phone call follow up, and maybe some direct mail.
Yeah. So getting out of college, what did you go to college for?
I did economics. I graduated at Rutgers in New Brunswick.
Okay. And then you got a job at Edward Jones, and then they're like, "Here you go knock on doors." So an economics major, and then going to knock on doors. What was going on in your mindset? What was going on in in the interview process? What was happening there?
So I had an idea that they were going to require that when I signed up. And I'd actually had experience with that in college because I did an internship for, Aflac,
Yeah.
the insurance company. So
Hmm.
that was my first foray into like cold prospecting. When I signed up for them, I thought, hey, I'll get my insurance license. And I thought they were just going to give us leads to
Hmm.
follow up with and call. And I said, oh, okay, that sounds like a good thing. And I get to the meeting and they're like, oh, no, you gotta go, introduce yourself to business owners. And I'm like, well, wait, are you gonna tell us the places or we just go out cold and introduce ourselves? And they said, no, you gotta go out cold and introduce yourselves to small business owners. So I kind of was like, I don't even know if I want to do that.
Yeah.
I kind of was like that night before the next day. The next day we were gonna go out and do it for the first time. And that night I'm like, yeah, do I want to do this or should I just throw the towel in and go find something else? And so I said, you know what, maybe I'll just give it a shot. And I did it, and I ended up getting the most. There was like a contest to get appointments, and I got the most appointments that day. That I won like a little cruise to go around Manhattan on a boat. So
Yeah, cool. Very cool. Yeah, so the idea of cold prospecting with the high rejection rate, I did multiple businesses where I had to go cold prospect, right? Knock on doors and go into a neighborhood and start one end of the street and work your way up and come back the next and get in your car and drive to the next street, right?
yeah,
Um, the fear of that, even being in that, and I'm typically an extroverted person. I like people. I don't mind talking to someone new. But for me, doing that on a daily basis had its toll, man. It was tough. It was really
yeah,
tough mentally getting that, door slammed in your face, people get off my fucking yard and yelling at you and you're like, whoa, running
yeah.
around. How did you deal with that? How did you overcome that or how do you do that? Like what
Just
you teach people now.
repetition, I guess.
Yeah.
And definitely in the beginning, you're nervous, and I think one of the you got to do a couple of things to overcome it. One is you want to make sure you have some kind of script memorized, because when you're nervous, you may not know what you're going to say. You can't really like wing it. You got to know
Yeah.
exactly what it is. You have to rehearse it. So I would say the more practice you can do on your own or with a partner, you're going to be better prepared for when you go out the first time. Because, like when I went out door knocking the first time with, for example, like Edward Jones, I was like, oh man, I never did like neighborhoods. So I would knock on the door and I already had the script in that I was going to say, the questions I was going to ask, and really like even they even showed us like how you should stand with the door, right? They said stand sideways, make sure your hands are visible, don't make it look like you're hiding anything, and stand maybe like 5 feet back from the door so that they're more likely to open it. Like you can't just crowd the door and like be peering in, and then they think you're going to attack them or
Yeah.
something. So, and I also, you want to be presentable. If you're not going to wear a suit, at least like professional clothing, nice pants, dress shirt tucked in, nice shoes, something like that. I think that would helps too. But at the end of the day, you just got to remember, I mean, you're just having a conversation with somebody, and after you get, at least for me, after I got through like the first maybe 5, 6 doors, it just became, you get a rhythm, you get into a rhythm and just keep going. And then it becomes like a game. Okay, I got, 5 phone numbers. I got to get like 10 more, and let's keep going. And then you hit your goals,
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I would advise on that, is being prepared and doing it over and over again will become until it becomes a habit, really.
Yeah. So now, fast forward, you went from, door knocking with Aflac and Edward Jones into, wholesaling deals, and then into Keller Williams. You took your license. And then at what point were you like, man, I should go out on my own, create my own brokerage and do this for myself?
So I guess in between, let me think about this. So I had a business before I got into the residential real estate investing. So
Okay.
I was working in finance out of college, and I had this one job that they basically, I worked my butt off, and then they said, oh well, we got to let you go. I'm like, for not for any performance reasons, just they had some kind of change in the company, and I had to be let go. And I said, you know what? I never want to be in a position where like I'm working my butt off and then somebody just decides to let me go and that's it. And I have no control over it. So at least if I have my own business, I can control that. And if I want to keep working, I keep working. Nobody's going to tell me you can't work. So that was like one of the motivating factors. I ended up starting a small business after that, completely different. It was actually, I was designing and selling men's leather goods like wallets, bags, and belts. And I ended up getting clients like TJ Maxx and Marshalls had did a couple orders for me, and I had like about 60 boutiques around the country that were buying. Um, but I guess I could say one of my mistakes with that one is I went into it not even having worked in the industry. I just kind of learned everything on my own. And I went to this, I would go to the Small Business Association to get advice. And then I built it up like that. And, it went its course, and it got to a point where I decided that would be better off kind of just shutting it down and going into a different industry, which is what happened. So when I became a realtor, I always had in the back of my mind, like, hey, this is an excellent industry that if I want to go on my own and start my own place, I can do that. And
Hmm.
I always had that goal in mind from the get go. So it wasn't like, I just decided to do it. I had that in mind, and I kind of just waited for the right opportunity to do it.
Got it. So what year was it that you went independent in real estate? Like you went out, left Keller Williams and started your own brokerage?
Sure, that was in 2021, and
Oh, recent.
yeah, it was last year. So, and actually, last year was my best year after having going independent. That was actually my best year in the business out of my entire time so far. So, and I'll be honest, it actually was it was earlier than I was planning, but probably the only reason it happened is because there's some changes at the other company that I thought, you know what, I better just do it now. The right timing presented itself, and I did it. So that was what pushed me to do it a little earlier than I originally planned.
Yeah. So starting up your own brokerage, you go from, just working under a machine, right? Keller Williams is a machine, or any of these large brokers, a machine, right? They got systems, processes, people, they've got manuals, they got everything they need, right? Because
Yeah.
they've been doing it for a while. To, all right, there you go, Christopher, launch. And now you're growing a team, you're growing salespeople, you're teaching people and such like that. Like, what was the biggest challenge for you in that process?
Well, uh, a lot of it's probably just mental
Yeah.
because, and you think about it, whether I'm at Keller Williams or I'm at here, right? At the end of the day, the people that I do business with, um, they care about the relationship they have with me, right? So if I'm just looking at my own clients, right, my relationship is with them. And when I left Keller Williams, all of my clients followed me to my new company. All the listings that I had that were on the market, that I had to go to them and say, hey, look, we're actually going on our own, and we need you to sign a new listing agreement and new paperwork, and they agreed to leave. So what that tells, I mean, I kind of knew this before, but really it's about your relationship with your clients, and the
Mhm.
brand is secondary, right? Yeah, that's great that they have all the tools and systems, and yeah, I mean they came in handy to me when I trained, but at the end of the day, that relationship with the client is between you and the client, and there it's not really with the brand overall per se. And then I would say in terms of training agents, um, somebody could go to Keller Williams and go through a training program, but in a lot of cases, and I'm not saying that they're bad training programs or anything like that, they're great training programs, but sometimes they bring people in that may not have direct real world experience, or maybe they have other experiences that have enabled them to get into this role. And then now they're training people on selling, and may or may not be the case, but in many cases that happens. And so I would say that with new agents, the advantage that I offer them is not just my experience at Keller Williams, but my experience throughout my entire professional history, which is revolved around selling. And it probably took me, when I look back on when I started in selling to where I'm at now, it probably took me a good maybe like 5 to 7 years before I started really being proficient at selling. Selling is, I guess, it's a tough business. There's a lot of people that make nothing, and there's a lot of people that make a lot of money in it. And it takes a lot of time to get to that point where it's second nature and you can really succeed at it. So I think having done that is very important for any new agents that want to come into the business, because sales is where they really trip up on it. I mean, most people can learn fairly quickly how to do a home valuation. They can learn how to look at the market. They can learn how to do all those back office things. But in terms of getting new business, that's the most important part, and that's where most people fail. I mean, if you look at the failure rate, I believe I think it's like after the second or third year, it's like a 80 something percent. And then after the fifth year, it's like 75% fail. So it's really a high rate. And so that's where I would say that, you know, it doesn't involve the Keller Williams brand. It really involves my own experience and how I can teach others around that.
So for sales to be second nature, right? Let's just say I come into your organization. I'm really interested in real estate, but let's just say my starting point with sales is nothing. Let's say I'm
Yeah.
coming in and you're like, "Oh, dude, you're you're super new, aren't you?" Right? Like, how do you what kind of things do we need to walk through and learn so that sales could be a second nature for me?
Sure. So, I mean, a lot of the basic things include, scripting, and also just prospecting, right? How do you go about contacting people? What do you say when you contact people? What do you say when somebody says, no, I'm not interested? How do you turn that around
Hmm.
to, steer it to what you need to get done? Now, the other thing too, a lot of new salespeople, and I used to fall into this trap. A lot of salespeople treat sales as like this, how do you call it? Like a machine. It's like a more of like a machine, right? Where it's like an automated process. Oh, if somebody says they're not interested, then I say this rebuttal, then I'm going to get them to say yes. Well, it's not really just about that. I mean, the scripts help you, but sales is about listen. Like a lot of salespeople don't listen to the other person, right? They may just say, I get calls sometimes and people, they say, "Hey, do you want to get the solar panel?" And I might tell them something, and then they haven't listened to what I told them. They just go on to a rebuttal, and then I just end up hanging up. So I think one of the biggest pieces is learning to listen to people and not just treating sales as like this automatic or like I call it like a machine or non-human way, you
Yeah.
know?
So sales gets a dirty word sometimes, right? Like, in real estate, that's your job, sales, right? I got my start in real estate construction and then real estate, but it's a sales driven role. You don't
Yeah,
sell, you don't eat, right? Like
yeah.
it's a you get a eat what you kill kind of mentality. Like when it comes to mindset of sales, like how do you help people become sales experts, right? Like that you've learned. How do you help people overcome that sales is not evil, sales is good?
Sure. So I think sales has gotten a lot of the bad reputations because um, a lot of people aren't trained the right way in
Hmm.
selling. So they may be trained certain ways where that, hey, you don't care about the customer. It's just like they go about it from like this selfish perspective as I need to sell this and I don't care what happens to the other person as long as they buy something from me, right? That's the wrong mentality. The mentality that I try to teach other people is that number one, you got to be honest, okay? Because when you're trying to build trust with somebody in order to gain their business, if you're dishonest and then they find out, well, you're ruined with them, but then they may tell other people that you're a liar and your reputation gets ruined. So that's number one. Number two, um, you want to pay attention to what the person may need and trust the other person. Like when you're talking with a friend, you're going to trust that what your friend tells you, right? It's the
Hmm.
same when you're talking to somebody over the phone. If they say, hey, you know what? I'm not really interested right now, but why don't you call me in 3 months and we might have a better conversation then, right? So I take that seriously. I say, okay, you know what? That's fine. I'll reach out to you in, maybe around 3 months or so, and we'll go from there. And I think other people will have the mentality like, oh, well, no, they're just trying to get me off the phone. I don't believe that. Oh, that's BS. I'm going to call them again next week and just keep calling. And then you end up pissing off the people, right? So you got to treat the client with a level of respect that you might treat your friend, and that's where I believe you got to come from in terms of the servicing and selling. It's you're talking with people, right? You're not talking with some people think that they treat clients like they're not intelligent, right? So I think you have to have that level of respect there to succeed.
Sure.
I don't know if that kind of fully answers the question or if you wanted me to delve into anything else out of that.
Yeah, so for it to be a second nature, right? Like we've seen the salespeople, they're almost like an infomercial. Like every time you hang around them, they're trying to pitch you. They're trying to get you to say yes. They're trying to get that. And it feels, we all have these friends, right? Like where you see their number on your phone, you're like, not answering that phone call,
Yeah.
right? Like how do you create it where you can, as a salesperson, where people, your friends will still answer your phone call or your family members will still, like, how do you do that as a second nature without being an idiot?
Yeah, I think you got to kind of come from a position of creating value,
Hmm.
not just say, hey, you need to buy or sell a home right now. Oh, okay. All right. Have a nice day. Right. You have to kind of create some value.
Hmm.
A lot of the ways that I keep in touch with people is by offering them, like market updates, or if we're working with a heating company, then maybe the heating company says, hey, we're willing to do a free heating evaluation for any of your customers. And so we'll tell people, hey, you know what? Just wanted to give you a call and let you know this heating company that we're partnering with is offering to do free heat evaluations before the winter time hits, something like that. Um, but you got to come from a position of creating value and also listening to what the other person says, right? So if you listen to what the other person says and you act based on what they tell you, then you create a level of respect between both you and the other person.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And we've all been in these situations where we feel like, people are just pitching to us to get the dollar bill, right?
Yeah,
And they have no desire to actually serve us, to work with us. They just want what's in my pocket should be in your pocket, right?
yeah,
Um, in the sales industry, you see those kind of people. How what kind of salespeople do you look for your organization?
So, if are you talking like an experienced person or a newer person that may be wanting to get in?
You make the call.
So, what are the things that I look for, right? If I want to work with somebody or bring them in and train them, I want to make sure that they have I guess, the respect to kind of tell me what is good, what they're thinking, right? So sometimes I'll talk to people and they say, yeah, you know what, I'm interested in working with you, and let's meet or whatever, and then they don't show up or they don't have
Hmm.
I end up calling them before and they say, no, you know what, I can't make it now, and then they just lead you on. They never tell you no, right?
Yeah.
So I look for the characteristics, within somebody where they have the guts to say, hey, no, I don't want to work with you right now. At least tell me that, right? I don't want somebody who doesn't have the guts to tell me what they need to say. Right. So that's
Yeah.
kind of one of the first things I look at. Like, if somebody's already doing this now, what are they going to do when I bring them on and I tell them that something has to be done? They give me a yes answer, but then nothing happens out of it. So I look for people that they're not afraid to say what needs to be said, and they follow through with their word. Right. So that's, I think, the most important things.
Yeah. As you're building this out, this is a new organization for what you're working on. What are some milestones that you hit in your brokerage? You said you've actually this was your best year ever in real estate. Give us an idea of what that looks like.
Yeah. So, for example, 2021, I did over, what did I do? Like 36 transactions, seller side transactions. So that's my personal clients. Hired a new, I actually went from having a virtual admin when I was over at Keller Williams to now hiring a licensed admin who stays in the office part time. And then hiring an additional two agents under me that do their own business and also help me if I need a showing assistant or if I need something taken care of on, maybe a buyer lead or something like that. They help me out with that as well. So that was going from when I was at Keller Williams, just having like more of a loosely based team. I had people in the office that would work with me a little bit, and then I had a dedicated admin, a virtual admin. So I've kind of taken that, put it more, tightly together, I guess you could say. And then in terms of hitting the transactions last year, I mean, 36 transactions. My number of transactions best year is 2020, which was like 42. 30, the last year was 36, but I ended up making more money on less deals than in 2020. So I would say that was a big milestone. That gave me additional money to. I ended up investing in a property last year too. I bought a rental property, and I actually bought it as a. I bought it like I would buy a flip,
Hmm.
but instead of selling it, I rented it out. So I have the equity in there if I want to use it or whatever I decide to do with it. I can reinvest that. So I think those are a couple of the milestones. Gaining an investment property, growing the business, and then being in a position this year to further expand the business based on the success of last year.
Nice. If I were getting started with your organization and I'm new to real estate, where would you deploy me? Like you're like, all right, here's where you get started. Here's how to do what I did. How would you deploy me?
So it depends. If you came to me and you wanted to be an agent and you didn't really know like where to start or what your strengths were, I would try to find out a little bit about maybe any strengths that you have. For example, an agent that I'm bringing on now, he has a strong community link, right? So he knows like a lot of people that are part of his church and some other avenues in the community. And the conversation I had with him was, hey, we can use these avenues to get you business, right?
Hmm.
That's an in that you have a strong community presence. I'm going to actually show him how to market in a proper way to that community without being, like you were saying, without being the annoying person who's like, hey, do you need to buy or sell a home? Hey, do you need to buy or I mean, that's not really how I want people to do business. You want to add value and at the same time let people know that you're available for any real estate needs that they have. So I would talk to you about what your strengths are. I would try to find out any maybe I guess, advantages that you have that we can position to success in real estate. Like, another example is, let's say you came from a sales role and you did a lot of cold calling and door knocking. Well, maybe I would just get you started doing the same thing I did, going after expired leads or for sale by owner leads and get you down that path. Like one of my other agents, I had her, she started out and she was doing like a lot of phone stuff. She came from another brokerage at first and then came over to work with me. And I started her on the same exact program that I used with expires.
Hmm.
And no, since she's been doing that, she just started this, what, in February? She's already got 2 deals under contract. I think on one of them, she has a buyer and the seller, and has more in the pipeline. So it definitely works if you put in the time and the effort. And to take a step further, I had her shadow me for a day, a couple days to see how I do things. And
Hmm.
then I made comments about, things that she needed to fix. Like one of the things I found with her was that when she was calling, she sounded like she was just reading a script. Like, hey, this is so and so. I'm calling to see if you're still looking to sell your home. I'm like, hey, hold on, hold on. You sound like you're reading a script. You got to be energetic. You have to sound like you're excited to talk, have the person on the phone, and that will be the difference of you getting into a conversation with them versus them hanging up on you.
Hmm.
So that was one of the other things we found. She changed that and combining it with the other things I had mentioned, and she's off to a good start now. So
That's huge.
um, that's, I think a good success story for the time being.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're building this out, building out your sales programs and teaching other people in sales, like what are some good sales resources that you've found over the years?
Oh, like books or things like that.
Books, tools, courses, you name it. What's up?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that there's a number of sales books. One of the first sales books I ever read was by Steve Schiffman, and it was I can't remember the title. I think it was like how to cold call, something around cold calling. And I ended up reading it after when I started at Aflac. I was doing a lot of cold calls, and
Yeah.
people were saying, "Oh, I'm not interested." And I would just say, "Oh, okay, have a nice day," and I would hang up because I was waiting for
Yeah.
that person to say, "Yeah, I am interested," which is not really how you approach it. So I read that book, and it kind of got me on the set up to know what to say if somebody says I'm not interested. Oh, a lot of my clients have told me the same thing before they see what the business is all about, or something along those lines to rebuttal what they tell you. So that's one. In terms of real estate sales, there are a couple of big books like The Millionaire Real Estate Agent.
Hmm.
That's a great book. The Millionaire Real Estate Investor is another great book. If you want to approach things from the investment side. Um, there's another one by, I think it's called Hold, which
Hmm.
specifically goes into buying rental properties and how to deal with that, how to find deals for those things. And then other sales books. I'm just trying to think. It's been actually quite some time since I've really read a sales book. I've been reading a lot of real estate stuff lately. Um, I don't know if this is a sales book, but like Think and Grow Rich.
Totally.
Um, and this is going to sound like it's coming out of left field, but I also read the Bible every day, and the Bible to me is something that is very motivating and positive and always provides hope. Whether if you think there's no hope in something, it gives you a way to think about something that will give you hope. To turn something around. So yeah, I think those are some of the best things out there.
What sales tactics are you learning from the Bible? Like Old Testament, New Testament? What are your
Yeah,
what are some
that's a
things you
good
glean from
one.
there?
I was talking about this with somebody the other day. One of the quotes I like in the Bible, I think it's in the book of Luke, and um, they talk about if the door does not open, you keep knocking and keep at it, and basically telling you to be persistent with it, and then the doors will be open, right? So
Hmm.
I think that is something that you can look at and remind yourself that, hey, sometimes the biggest obstacle to success is just giving up, right?
Hmm.
And not, I don't mean like doing the same thing over and over again. That's really like if it's not working, that's really insanity. But what I mean is, you're trying one, like for example, with myself, right? I tried one avenue to own a business and it didn't really work out. Well, I didn't give up, my desire to own a business right there. I tried a real estate business, and now I'm on the pathway to, I'm on the success path with that. So I think those are, when you think about persistence, is not giving up on your ultimate goal and finding different ways. If one way is not working, go about it a different way and keep at it.
Mhm.
So I think that's really important. I think that's something you can learn from reading the Bible.
Super cool. Yeah, one of my the favorite things, and I learned this because I was door knocking. I've wholesale properties. I started in real estate where they're like, okay, here's your, whatever, go get deals, right?
Yeah,
And you start knocking doors, and you go to FISBOs, for sale by owners, and then you're just trying to figure it out. And then I found door knocking, and then when I built a construction company, I had a door knock, right, to get new some deals. But there's a verse in the Bible that says, "You have not because you ask not." Essentially, so it's like you never know what's out there or what you could get unless you just specifically ask for it.
sure.
And that comes, at the time of the closing. That comes for the opportunity. Just asking for things. A lot of times people are open to it, but we don't ask, or we try to get too slick, and then we miss it rather than just going asking, right? Do you think that we, as salespeople or business people, do you think we overcomplicate the sales process or sales in general? And have you seen that?
Sometimes, yeah, and I think that goes back to what I was telling you about, listening to what the other person tells you, right?
Yeah.
And actually, I can even revert this back to the Bible. Like another thing that just came to mind is having the faith to know that the work you're doing is going to get the results, and as long as you're going about it in an ethical manner and a respectful manner, you're putting in the time, you're putting in the work, you're going to get results out of it. So I think one of the ways that they overcomplicate things is forgetting that a big part of sales is you're talking to another person, you're having a conversation with another person. It's not that much more complicated than that. I mean, I think sometimes people get overrun with like objection handling and having the right line to say at the right moment, and in a lot of cases those come into play at certain times, but it's not like the be all and the end all, right? I mean, that could be a lot of those objection handlers are in the beginning of conversations, and then you use that to parlay into a more in-depth conversation and ask questions about, hey, what, tell me more about your situation, or, what's going on. Like one of the things that a lot of people like to answer to me is I ask them, I say, well, like with an expired listing, how come you're, if you don't mind me asking, why didn't your house sell? And they get into that and they start talking. And if they're doing all the talking and you're listening, you're winning. If you're doing all the talking and they're just listening, you're losing. So you got to make it about them, about their situation, and how you can help them get into a better situation than where they're at.
Super interesting. Now, speaking of listening, can you hear the guys do? I think they're running wire. Were you hearing that like a
No, I
second ago?
can't hear anything.
Awesome. All right. So these mics, these expensive mics, actually are working, doing their job. But yeah, I think getting other people talking is um, is such a great sales tip, right? Because I think a lot of times we just think that we need to go pitch, 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 elevator pitch, new rebuttal, new script, and a lot of times it's just letting people just unfold for you. What's on their heart, what's on their mind, what's going on in their situation. They'll tell you the main problem, but I think we talk too much as salespeople, and that's
Yeah.
when I typically see new versus experienced.
Yeah, you're
Um,
right. I mean, I see that in a lot of cases. It's like I had one agent that they would just keep talking and talking, and I'm like, you got to let the other person talk. And especially like if you're showing a house, you don't want to interject your opinions into every feature of the house. What if they really like that and you just told them that's it's ugly, and now they feel they don't want to get it now. It's a lot of features in a house are personal opinions. So if I go and I say, oh, that's an ugly countertop, and what if the client loved the countertop and they were going to make an offer on the house, and now because I interjected my opinion, they're not too crazy about it anymore. And honestly, we do have to give our opinions at the right moments and for the right things, but
yeah.
things like that, you want to be make it about them and not over talk and talk yourself out of a sale.
Yeah, don't talk yourself out of a sale. Oh my gosh, I've done that before in the past where I'm like, you don't have to make any decision now. I'm happy to, come back in a few days, and they're like, a checkbook in hand, ready to rock and roll. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I was afraid of the close. I was afraid of the actual success. There's one time I won a sales competition, right? And I was surprised that I won because I think some internal dialogue that was going on in my head where I was surprised that I won, and because I don't think I earned it or deserved it, even though I worked harder than everybody else. But
Yeah.
I found that like I lacked what you shared earlier, is do the work. You're doing good work. Believe in it and believe that you'll get the results for it. I didn't have that. I was
Yeah.
just working to put food on the table. Um, how do you help people with if they're in a sales? Have you ever been in a sales slump or a situation where you lost confidence or you lost a big deal and it affected your day or your business?
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning of selling, like back going all the way back to the beginning of my career, like maybe in like 2007, '08, '09, um, when I was at Edward Jones, for example, I had a guy that he was ready to do business with me. And I don't remember all the details, but I know that I had door knocked him, and then he wasn't really in the best mood at the door. And then somehow I got his phone number. I followed up with him on the phone, and then I went over, met with him, and he was signing up for an account. And then it came time to do the investment, and there was something that I screwed up. I think something with like the price. I don't remember exactly what it was. And I remember I called him up. I said, "Hey, listen, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I actually didn't disclose this, or I forgot to tell you about this aspect." And I said, "Look, I'll bring your check back and whatever." I was embarrassed because I messed it up. And then I'm like, now he's going to think I'm trying to scam the guy. So I just told him, I said, "Look, you don't want to do business, that's fine. I'll take your check back to you, and that's it." And so I ended up doing that. He said, "Yeah, bring it back," and that was it. But I mean, but I guess what we can learn from that is a lot of sales is sometimes about the details
Yeah.
that we oftentimes in the beginning of our careers may overlook, and we don't care. Oh, as long as I just get somebody to agree, the details will take care of themselves. But not, in certain roles, right? You got to pay attention to all the details, because a big part of sales is building trust. And one of the ways that we build trust where we don't even realize is by being consistent with what we say and do.
Hmm.
So if you're telling somebody something, but then you're doing something different, or even if you tell somebody, "Hey, I'm going to call you tomorrow at 3 o'clock," and you don't call them at 3 and you call them at like 5 o'clock, well, what is that saying right there? That's saying that I can't be trusted
Hmm.
to call at 3 o'clock. So I think those are some of the things that newer salespeople don't realize how important they are. The little things are very important. Now, in terms of setbacks and getting, ahead of, around that, you're always going to make mistakes. And it took me probably, I would say, because I always had that issue in the beginning, right? You would make a mistake, and then you get, "Oh man, all this work I just did." And like, for
Hmm.
example, with that client, I did a lot of work, and then I missed out on the sale because of that. Well, I mean, it's something that you gotta get around, and I guess you gotta end up doing so much business that if you mess up some stuff, you can still get by with some of the business that is going well for you. Because as a new salesperson, you may make mistakes, right? The difference is if you're being ethical and honest about them versus being underhanded about it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a saying, sales covers a multitude of mistakes, right? So if you have one deal on the table and it falls apart, your business went to zero. But if you have 100 deals and you make that same mistake on one of them, you got 99 others. So this
Yeah.
constant prospecting, constant lead gen, constant sales is so needed, especially getting into real estate and growing out the real estate. For fellow deal makers out there, what advice do you have on prospecting today? Right, so door knocking is very different after post COVID, right, or during
Sure.
even COVID. So, what is a way for residential door knocking essentially in today's market?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, what was it? March of 2021, I actually decided to go out and door knock because it was slow.
Mm-hmm.
during that time last year. And I said, you know what? Let me get out in the afternoon and door knock. And I door knocked a neighborhood that wanted to try to take over more,
Uh-huh.
and it did, and it worked because now I'm getting a lot of business out of that neighborhood. But actually, I got a very positive response to because I had the mentality I was like, man, if I go out, people are probably not going to want to open the door because of the virus and all this stuff. And it happened that everybody was home, so I had an
Yes.
enormous response rate because people were home and they didn't really care. They opened the door. I think because I was outside, I still had like a mask in my hand because I didn't put it on because like if you had the mask on, they probably wouldn't be able to hear me behind the door. So I just had it on. I had it on in my hand and it was visible, so if they could see that I had something, if they wanted to talk further, come out.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had over. No, I didn't have anybody tell me like, "What are you doing out here? Use COVID or whatever." No, nothing like that. I mean, it was a good response, and I was probably the only one that had been around there in a long time.
Oh, so good. Here's what I'm pulling from this, right? If you would have listened to that voice that said, "Oh man, worldwide pandemic, nobody wants to see me." If you listened to that internal dialogue, you would have missed out on all these sales that are coming up that. But if you're like, you know what? Let's flip on the opposite side. Everybody's probably afraid of that. Let's flip on the opposite. They're home. That's
Yeah,
awesome, right? Like
yeah,
everyone was home. I didn't even think of that. I was just thinking, yeah, nobody would want to talk to me. We got the this and that. They're gonna shoot. Awesome. Nice work, man. Really good.
yeah.
Super challenging. All right, so I've got some cards that have questions on it. Tell me when to stop.
Sure. Okay.
All right. So the question is, when you were going through high school, what was the coolest person that you looked up to? You're like that person I want to be like, and where would they be maybe today? What do you think they're doing today?
Huh. Well, like, so would it have to have it would be somebody that was alive at that time, or like an idol or a role model? Like,
Yeah, yeah, someone that you really looked up to.
well, let me think. I mean, in high school, I was a big runner, so I did cross country and track and field.
Yep.
And at the time, I idolized another runner from like the '70s, Steve Prefontaine.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I would always kind of like I always used to look at what his times were, and then I would compare my times. And I know my sophomore year, I ended up running the same mile time as him, and I'm like, oh, if I could keep progressing, maybe I'll be as great as this guy was. And then I ended up getting injured and whatnot. But it was a big idol for me. Not somebody that I had direct contact, or he's deceased at this point.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that answers the question or if it was something else that they were kind of looking for.
No, I think that's good. How'd you injure yourself?
So it was overtraining. A lot of the stuff was overtraining and not knowing like the right training to do for the level that I wanted to get to. And it's kind of funny because I guess it's like almost like the same similar journey as like selling as running it to selling, because in running I always had this goal. Like I wanted to train at 100 miles a week, and I tried to get up to that in high school, and I would always get injured or something would happen. And so it took me like, I would say probably 10 years to get it right. And I finally got to a point where I could train at 100 miles a week. I did it. I ran a marathon. I did a marathon in like 2 hours and 52 minutes. And then I did a half marathon. And then I said, you know what? I got my fill. I'm
Yeah.
done now. But it took me like so long to learn, I guess, the right training just because I didn't have the proper guidance at the time. I guess. I don't know. It was just, crazy story.
Super cool. So, I'm here in Central Florida, south of you. Where are you located?
I'm in Princeton, New Jersey.
Okay, cool. So if someone's listening in and they want to connect with you and maybe do a deal with you around you, what's a good place for them to find you and connect with you?
Yeah, so I think Google Avallon Real Estate Group, I'll come up on Google, or if they go to my website, avallonre.com. The only thing is the Avalon actually has two L's in it. I know a lot of spellings of Avalon have one. This mine has two. So
Yeah. And that's your last name, Christopher
yeah,
Avallon, right?
yeah,
Okay, got it.
yeah.
Yeah. What's a question during this interview about deals and sales and such that I should have asked you, or even about your personal life, that I should have asked you that I completely screwed up and did not ask you?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I'm not sure if there's anything that we really missed. I don't think I can pinpoint anything, unfortunately.
Cool. So, so you've given us a good place to connect with you. One last question: what does the future look like? So you and I, we're hanging out maybe 20 years from now or something like that. We look back and we go, we did it. What does that look like? What does that success marker look like for you?
For me, I mean, it looks like turning into, my brokerage into a franchise, having and going from, being a single branch to maybe a national franchise and, having investment properties that I can rely on as well. I mean, it's supposed to basically diversifying my investments into more real estate and growing my business to the point where I can franchise it. That would be probably my main success point.
Hmm. Awesome. 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 All right. Well, Christopher, thanks for being on the show today, man. Really enjoyed your story. Love talking about sales and business, and I appreciate what you're doing. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow deal makers out there, as always, reach out to our guests and say thank you for connecting and sharing your story on the show with Josh. If you want to do a deal with one of our guests, all their contact information is in the show notes. So direct connect with them directly, and find a way to do a deal together. That's the purpose and mission of the show. If you're working on a deal and you want to talk about it here on the show or share your deal making story, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, maybe get you on the show next. Till then, talk to you all on the next episode. See you, everybody.